Hey everyone, let's go back in time today and talk about the 1989 film Batman by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton as Batman slash Bruce Wayne and Jack Nicholson as the Joker slash Jack Napier. Now, this movie was huge overall. Okay, overall, this was a massive movie. It was really like, okay, the Superman movie from like 1978. That was big. That was really, really big. And it was even bigger. And not just because, it was a really good movie, but because it kind of symbolized a break in the tradition of kind of comic book movies up to that point. Okay, there was kind of a wholesome kind of feel to the comic book movies of like the 70s and the 60s. Even Batman in the 60s was pretty upbeat and fun and kid-friendly, all that stuff, and just funny. And Richard Donner's Superman was bright, pretty upbeat as well, with some drama in there, of course. But overall, it was a very light and bright kind of thing. And Tim Burton showed up and was just like, you know what? With Batman, it doesn't make sense. We're not going to do that, okay? So he created this kind of completely different style, a very kind of neo-noir, Gotham City, this kind of dystopian, kind of alternative history, kind of futuristic, yet, it felt old as well kind of world. This Gotham City feels like it was shot in like the 30s or 40s, but all the technology that Batman has, for example, is very futuristic, like the Batmobile, all that stuff, and it creates a really interesting contrast. You add to that all the stuff that made this movie as popular as it was, the score, the amazing theme slash score by Danny Elfman. Wow, what an achievement. Like, they still have not managed to beat Danny Elfman's theme in terms of just, not just like Batman themes, but probably just superhero themes altogether. I mean, it was that, wow, iconic, okay? Even just the image of the Batman, logo as the poster. There's just something very iconic about this movie, all the way through, even the Joker, right? This movie inspired pretty much every comic book movie in the 90s. Every single one, from The Shadow to The Phantom to even Dick Tracy to everything that came out, and beyond even that. It inspired movies like the Punisher movies, etc. This movie just created kind of a new template for the superhero movie, and it's been copied time and time and time again, but never, quite matched the kind of impact that it had the first time around. And, this kind of gave carte blanche to filmmakers to be like, hey, you know what? Superhero movies, they don't have to be, kid-friendly. They don't have to be so upbeat. They can be dark. They can be gothic. They can be violent. And they can be, they can be kind of blurring the lines between, entertainment for, that kids can enjoy who read comic books, but really, adults can really enjoy as well. I obviously don't remember too much about, like, the world at the time because I was really, really young. But I do remember my parents recording this movie onto a VHS tape for me. And I watched it when I was quite young, definitely under 10 years old. And there's some violent stuff in that movie. Like, if you remember, there's some stuff. We'll get to the movie itself in a minute, but there's some there's some rough stuff in that movie here and there. And I must have watched that movie 100 times. I mean, I just loved just like marveling at it. I would look away when something really kind of messed up would happen, like when the Joker, for example, shakes hands with that mobster guy, and then he just basically, he basically kind of sets himself on fire, and then he's all like burnt up and stuff. That was scary for like a kid, but it was funny as well because you've got Jack Nicholson who's just hamming it up as the Joker, and he's having the time of his life. So it was just this kind of really weird take on superhero stuff that I really had never seen before. I'd never experienced something like that before, and after seeing that movie, I was hooked on comic book stuff. I was hooked on Batman stuff. This movie is interesting looking back because it's not really... There's such a difference between this movie and Batman Returns that it feels like a different filmmaker made them almost. You can tell that there's a lot of Tim Burton in both movies, but in this first movie, I feel like Tim Burton's style is restrained to a certain extent. And I think that might be for the better of the film, because the film is not, it's gothic and it's dark, but it's not too fantastical, right? It goes weird places, and it does feel obviously like a fantasy, but there is this kind of like film noir feel to it that the second movie doesn't really have. The second movie kind of breaks from that quite a bit. The first movie really does feel like this kind of Dick Tracy kind of vibe. It feels like an old serial, which, I'm sure, Tim Burton was inspired by the old Batman serials as well, the black and white ones, which were actually not bad. And they were definitely darker than the Adam West 60s show. So I think he was inspired a little bit by that, a little bit by the 60s show as well. I mean, the look of the Joker is very much kind of a Cesar Romero kind of thing, except it's twisted so much upside down that it actually it goes from like funny to just like disturbing. And Jack Nicholson, obviously, the right man for the job here. That's one thing I really like that I think that Joel Schumacher tried to do in Batman Forever, which is to take what was cool about the old Batman stuff, the old kind of 60s show, and just turn it on its head just enough to make it palatable for like a modern day audience and adults and kids alike. Joel Schumacher just about managed that with Batman Forever, and then went too far with it, turned the dial all the way back to the 60s Batman in Batman and Robin. But Tim Burton knew exactly what he was doing. He really didn't sugarcoat anything. This Batman is seen by comic book fans still as a very like way too murderous Batman, and I think I can see why. Okay, I understand that. I do believe personally that there's a lot of room for different interpretations of characters and different interpretations of comic book stories. So I'm not bothered with Batman kind of doing some pretty harsh things in this movie and the next movie as well. But it's this kind of, there's been a blurring over the years since comic book movies have become bigger and bigger and more and more expensive, and more with the advance of CGI, more and more able to do a lot of really out there things. Like when I was a kid, I never imagined we could possibly have a Thor movie that would be believable in any way at all, or even the Hulk movie. We're so spoiled with comic book stuff nowadays. Now we're getting stuff like you'd never even thought they would even try. In the 90s, you could never imagine that they would even attempt to do Guardians of the Galaxy, let alone the Eternals and all that stuff. So we're kind of spoiled nowadays, and it makes us kind of look at old comic book movies, including Batman 1989, and go, why is this Batman not faithful to the idea of Batman that we have in our minds from the comics, like, grounded, right now, it would be easy to do that. But at the same time, it's like, I think, there's two separate questions here. There's the question is like, is this a good adaptation of the comics? And is this a good movie? These are two different questions. I think one might be able to influence the other a little bit. Like, for example, if you've got a movie that's like a masterpiece, and you've got a book that it's based on, and the book is very good as well, but the movie's not really a very good adaptation, then you can't say it's a bad movie. It's still a very, very good movie. It's still a masterpiece. It just happens to also not be a very good adaptation. Examples of that, you've got The Shining, right? Stephen King was so outraged by The Shining being such a big break from the book that he was just like, didn't want anything to do with it. Same thing with Blade Runner. Blade Runner, Philip K. Dick was not a huge fan. He kind of got turned around kind of later on, but he was really not up for it. Like, there was so many changes to the replicants, all that stuff. But, Blade Runner is a masterpiece. So what can you do? You can say, oh, it's not a good adaptation, but you can't say it's not a good adaptation, therefore it's not a good movie. You can't do that. So, for example, you can say that the 1989 Batman film is not a great adaptation of, the Batman comic books, but you can't say this is not like an amazing movie. It is an amazing movie, okay? Which, if you look at something like, for example, The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight, I would say, is just as good. Like, it's just as successful as a movie, right? The Dark Knight is an amazing movie. But is it really that close to the comics? A little bit more, but not quite. Not quite. It's not exactly like the comics. Let's be real here. So it does get the spirit of Batman not killing people more right in The Dark Knight, though. They definitely did their best to kind of, capture that. And I think that's why it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is you've got different interpretations of the same character in the same comics, and you can get something out of it, either way. So I love this movie. I love the 1989 Batman movie. I keep going back and forth between which is my favorite Batman movie. Is it this one or is it Batman Returns? I still don't know. I keep going back and forth on it. When I was a little kid, like I said, before I was 10 years old, it was Batman. Then for a very brief time, it was Batman Returns. And then I saw Batman Forever. So for an even briefer time, it was Batman Forever. And then I went back to Batman Returns. I was like, no, I love Batman Returns. It's so freaking good. And then I went back to Batman. And I keep going back between now Batman Forever, obviously, I don't think is as good as either one. Either Batman or Batman Returns. But I'm still not sure exactly. I still haven't made up my mind. This movie blew me away the first time I watched it, the second time, the third time. Just an incredible movie. You've got the casting of Michael Keaton, which was controversial at the time because Michael Keaton was mostly known for random stuff like Mr. Mom, or I guess Beetlejuice came out just before, Night Shift, that kind of thing. And he was great in all of these movies. But it's not really the person at the time that you picture as playing Batman. I guess people were ready at the time. They were really ready for an imposing, almost scary Batman, and they just didn't picture Michael Keaton to be that. And Michael Keaton proved them wrong like instantly. Even though Michael Keaton is not a particularly tall guy, he does come off as intimidating in this movie. And I love that there is a difference between him as Bruce Wayne and him as Batman. He's good in both roles, and I love that he feels like a real person when he plays Bruce Wayne. There is a certain amount of depth to his Bruce Wayne that I think is not appreciated enough. Okay, I feel like his Bruce Wayne, it feels like just a normal guy. He kind of jokes around here and there, but also there is a coldness to him, and you can see in his eyes that he still suffers from the trauma from his childhood. You don't need to overemphasize this too much. Like, you get it just looking into this guy's eyes. And sometimes there's certain scenes in this movie and Batman Returns where he switches. You see a little bit of a switch from the kind of the kind and kind of normal Bruce Wayne to the darker, more calculating kind of genius of Batman that's just kind of like lurking within him. And it's really interesting. This movie obviously deals a lot more with the death of Batman's parents. And it takes a lot of liberties. Again, comic book fans were kind of like, what? The Joker killed Batman's parents, Bruce Wayne's parents, which is, that I thought that was weird even as a kid. I was like, oh, I didn't think that was what happened, but okay. But it works in the movie itself. This is just an extra kind of personal thing to give Batman more oomph to take on the Joker. I don't think it's all that necessary, but at the same time, it would have. Think back, if Joe Chill had killed Batman's parents, I feel like there would have been people who'd be like, "Why didn't you just make the Joker kill Bruce Wayne's parents?" Because it's not a character that's going to be in the movie. Although you could have had Joe Chill in the movie, like working for Jack Napier or something, and Jack Napier could have been. But I mean, you could have done a little rewrite like that. But it just feels like they want. The good thing about this movie is that it just gets to the point. It gets to the point pretty quickly. It really starts off as a detective movie. Like, you've got this mysterious character, this Batman, who's just kind of like in the streets taking on criminals, and the criminals, like, when they see him, they basically lose their minds. Like, you start off and you've got these two dudes, these two thugs who are like robbing this family, right? And Batman shows up, kicks their ass, and then the guy's like almost traumatized, like it didn't make sense. Like, he shot this Batman like in the chest, and he fell to the ground, and then he came back to life, and then he's just like, I'm Batman. And like, that just messed that guy up. Like, just mentally, he was gone. That was just such a cool introduction, and just like the build up to that. But then after that, Batman takes a step back after that, which I always thought was interesting. After that, you follow Knox, this guy who works for the press, played by Robert Wool. And Knox is actually a huge, really important character in this movie. And you never see him again. You never see him in Batman Returns, although there's a character you kind of feel like that was probably meant to be Knox for a split second. But yeah, Knox is a huge, part of this movie because he kind of brings everyone together in a way. Not in a way, just like he really does bring everyone together. Like he brings Kim Basinger's character together with Bruce Wayne, because that's what he's investigating. He's investigating the Batman. He's also, looking at Bruce Wayne a little bit. Not really putting two and two together, but that's okay. That's Kim Basinger's job. So the movie gives you some good stuff straight away and then kind of waits for a while. Just kind of eases you in to what this movie is going to be. And eventually, you've got Jack Palance, who is awesome in this movie. There's a few underrated performances in this movie. You've got Robert Wool, and you've got Jack freaking Palance in this movie, who is an amazing mob boss. He doesn't get that much screen time, but he's freaking Jack Palance in a Batman movie. Like, you can't think of a better mob boss in one of these movies, in one of these comic book movies, than freaking Jack Palance. It doesn't get more intimidating than that. Jack Nicholson works for Jack Palance. That's how intimidating Jack Palance is. So I wonder if Jack Palance could have played the Joker. That would have been freaking weird. That would have just been bizarre. He could have actually made it work as well, but it would have been weird. So obviously there is something going on with these mobsters, right? You've got Jack Napier, played by Jack Nicholson, who is working for Jack Palance, but there is a weird love triangle going on with Jack Palance's wife, who Jack Napier is obviously seeing on the side, and Jack Palance appears to know that this is going on, so you know that Jack Palance is gonna set him up to fail. So there's robbery that's planned, and Jack Palance goes up to Jack Napier's like, "You're my number one guy." And he's just like, well, it looks like he's just fondling him, but that's just his shoulders. Okay, chill. And so he sends Jack Napier on this mission to rob this factory, this big factory, and obviously it's a trap. He calls the cops at the same time. The cops show up, and there's a shootout between Jack Napier and the cops. Then Batman shows up. And Batman also has a clash with Jack Napier. Unfortunately, this ends up with Jack falling into a vat of acid. Batman unable to save him because his hands slip away. And therefore, the Joker is created eventually. Now, the introduction of the Joker is awesome as well. Really iconic. The first thing you see is the white kind of hand coming out of the vat of acid, which is genius. And then you don't see the Joker's face. Then there's this big delay to seeing the Joker's face. And I just think Tim Burton is so good at the introduction of villains in these movies. Even in Batman Returns with the Penguin, he's just so skillful at kind of delaying there's a suspense there. There's a suspense to seeing what this character looks like now, and understanding everything you need to know about that character just from seeing them. And there's obviously the scene with the surgeon and Jack Nicholson with the mirror. Show me the mirror. He wants to see what he looks like, and then he sees himself and then bursts into laughter and breaks the mirror. So good. What a perfect scene. It's twisted, it's gross, it's dark, it's funny, it's twisted, it's Tim Burton. It's just perfect. And then, Michael Keaton, you do get this vision of Bruce Wayne as this kind of very lonely man who just has who has these cavernous rooms in his giant castle house. But really, he's happier just hanging out with Alfred in the kitchen. He's not really that kind of guy. There's a disconnect between the person that he is and the person that Bruce Wayne was meant to be. But also, obviously, Batman, right? There's this normal guy and there's Batman. So it's kind of he's divided into three. And for me, that's the beauty of Batman Returns, which finally kind of explores the three sides, right? The monster through the Penguin, the vigilante, the twisted vigilante through Catwoman, and obviously the shrewd businessman through Christopher Walken's character Max Schreck. But we'll get to that in my review of Batman Returns. In this movie, we don't go too deeply into it. We just kind of see who Bruce Wayne is through Vicky Vale, played by Kim Basinger, who is just fascinated by this entire Batman thing, and eventually she becomes fascinated by Bruce Wayne, and then she becomes a love interest, and he takes her back to the Batcave as Batman, and she finds out obviously what his identity is, but not straight away though. First, we get some cool stuff in there. We get the creation of the Joker, who gets his revenge on Jack Palance, of course. I love that characters proclaim who they are in this movie. You know, it's like, I'm Batman. There's a contrast between the I'm Batman moment and the you can call me Joker. You know, it's the same kind of badass attitude, and they are connected in this one moment, these two characters. But it's a very different outcome, right? Batman doesn't kill the criminal. He just lets him go, and then the police come and pick him up. Joker flat out just like kills Jack Palance, like just keeps shooting him over and over again. So here, you know, you've got this kind of moment where they're connected with this proclaiming of who they are, but then who they are very different. Batman doesn't just like kill people for like no apparent reason, at least up to this point. So then the story obviously becomes there's a few things that happen. Kim Basinger really connects everybody. Like, she connects even the Joker to Bruce Wayne and Batman, okay? Because the Joker has this obsession with her. He's seen her take pictures, you know, at certain events, and he's just like, wow, he's in love with her. You know, he's got the wife of Jack Palance that he's, you know, pissed off at because she told Jack Palance what happened. And so he gets his revenge on her very quickly and pretty brutally. This is the first thing I think in the movie, or one of the first things in the movie, apart from the surgeon scene, that's kind of troubling as a kid. When you're watching this movie as a kid, there's a few troublesome things. There's like the hand coming out of the vat all messed up, and the surgeon sequence. And then there's the girl, Jack Palance's wife, with like, who's wearing a cracked mask. That's just messed up. That's just so creepy. That's just super creepy. And just like the Joker, just like clearly abusing her. You don't see him do it, but you see him like break the mask at one point. This is just a very brutal image. And obviously like the guy burning to death and stuff like that later on. But some troubling images here and there. And just to wrap this up, so the Joker is obsessed with Kim Basinger, demands a meeting with her, and they meet in the museum. Obviously, the museum sequence is incredible, and this connects the Joker to Batman finally. And I love that this movie, this was actually something that I changed my mind on quite a bit. When I was a kid, the soundtrack did not appeal to me. It just felt really out of place. You know, the Prince is making the music for this movie, and the music's incredible. But as a kid, I just didn't understand why this kind of funky music was in this movie at all. Like, it felt like too different to the kind of 40s detective kind of vibe of it all, and the score of Danny Elfman. It just felt like it was clashing a lot with Danny Elfman's score. But growing up, you kind of understand why, right? Prince is basically the Joker theme, right? Prince is scoring the Joker, and Danny Elfman is scoring Batman. And this contrast is exactly what this movie is going for, and it works so well because it is so disjointed and it is so different. And the Joker's theme, apart from Beautiful Dreamer, which is also a theme in there for the Joker's theme is so fun, so funky. It just makes you understand why the people of Gotham would be drawn towards the Joker in a positive way, why they would trust him at the end, you know? Whereas Batman has this kind of moody, scary theme, and people don't really know who he is, what he does. He's kind of perceived as a villain, so you understand as well why the people of Gotham would be not drawn towards Batman straight away. Until the very end, of course, where they see the Joker for who he really is. And I think, you know, the Joker does try to kill hundreds and hundreds of people in this movie. You know, the Joker is so good in this movie, okay? Like, Jack Nicholson, is still for me the best Joker. I mean, he's hilarious. Like, can we just agree that Jack Nicholson as the Joker is just hilarity itself? He is so funny. He is so wacky. He looks messed up. Like the Joker the look that they went with, it's still, there's something haunting about it. I love it. It's like Cesar Romero, if he did actually fall into a vat of acid, you buy it. You buy it. The makeup is so freaking good. And Jack Nicholson, what a pro, man. Like, he makes a character so funny, so clever, so evil, so bold in his evilness that he actually has advertisements on television about like poisonous like makeup, and the news person like basically, I don't know if they die. I feel like they do die in the middle of the show. Like, it's so dark, it's so evil, that his plan is so evil that by the time that Michael Keaton as Batman shows up and wants to basically shoot him, he does kind of try to shoot him at one point. You're kind of like, you know what? Fucking go ahead. Go ahead. This guy's evil as shit. So that's why I didn't mind it when I was a kid. The whole Batman trying to shoot Joker thing, and you can also argue that he didn't really try to shoot him, try to injure him or something. Whatever. I don't care. It's a cool scene. I mean, if you are sitting there and you watch the bat plane scene, which is amazing, by the way, and you're just like, that's what you take away from it, that, oh, Batman shouldn't have shot the Joker. It's just like, bro, you're missing like how good this scene is. There's some really standout, amazing sequences in this movie. Okay, the museum sequence is so good. The factory sequence is so good. The opening scene where you see Batman, the I'm Batman scene, is really cool. You've got the cathedral at the end is really, really cool. The bat plane sequence with the Joker giving out money, such a good scene. The Love That Joker scene. One underrated scene is where the Joker shows up on the steps of like the mayor's office or wherever that was, and kills a dude. And it's just like such a good scene, like the build up with the mimes and everything. It's just awesome. And of course the scene with the Batmobile, with Kim Basinger in the car trying to see, who's under the mask of Batman, and you've got Danny Elfman's theme really comes into its full force in that scene. Such an amazing sequence. This is a movie that is just, it looks fantastic. Like, it's moody. Visually, this is a very, very kind of gloomy movie, but it looks so beautiful at the same time. It looks exactly the way that a Batman movie should look. It's got this kind of old-fashioned feel to it. It's got this modern kind of 80s feel to it as well. The Prince music that was one of my main problems initially. It does kind of date the movie a little bit, right? Only in the 80s would you have like a score, like a soundtrack like that. It does date the movie a little bit, but at the same time, Prince's songs are so kind of out there that it works. Like, it just works anyway. You get the idea that they were going for, which is this kind of big contrast with Danny Elfman's score. So yeah, amazing score, amazing cast. The cast is so good. Casting Michael Gough as Alfred is just inspired. Tim Burton bringing his love of like old Hammer films and old B movies to the table, just plucking Michael Gough out of there and just planting him in this Batman movie, a kind of modern day monster movie, which is what I love about Tim Burton's take on Batman, is that he really sees them as kind of an extension of the Universal monsters almost, And this really comes into play in Batman Returns, but you get a lot of that in this as well, You get this kind of Hammer horror feel to it, which actually ends up working really well with Batman. But also, as a blockbuster, it's so much fun. There's never 1 minute in this movie where you're like, this sucks, or this is boring. Even like the scenes where like it's just kind of Bruce Wayne talking to Vicky Vale, those are just very atmospheric, beautifully written scenes. And the cast is fantastic. Like I said, just one epic sequence after another, and the climax at the top of the cathedral is just epic, and it doesn't have to go all out, like this movie doesn't it's not like a spectacle for the sake of being a spectacle at the end. There's this kind of like build up. There's a really cool, intense build up to Batman finally facing the Joker on top of the cathedral, and the face off it's explosive, and but it's also like all of it plays on like in one moment. One moment clinches it for Batman. And obviously killing off the Joker is, controversial as well, because you would have liked to see Jack Nicholson again. But I think it makes sense. There's so many good Batman villains. I would have loved Tim Burton to make another movie, after Batman Returns, because he definitely had plans for that. But what can you do? Also, another great thing about the Tim Burton movies, they don't bother about like setting up the next thing. That's nowadays it's like every superhero movie must set up the next movie. And it's just like, sometimes you really don't need that. You can just kind of like assume, hey, maybe there's going to be a next movie. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be a different person making it, Like even for his own films, Tim Burton doesn't really set up for the next movie, So Batman Returns feels so self-contained, and that's kind of cool. You don't have to connect all these movies together. They can just be different adventures happening at different times, And that's the kind of serial vibe that this movie also picks up on. Look, I'll tell you straight up, this is still one of the best comic book movies ever made. Maybe not one of the most faithful adaptations of a comic book ever made, but it's irrelevant. It's a good-ass movie. That's all I care about. When I watch a movie, I just want to see a really, really good movie, and this one is way better than most, I would say. So I would recommend you revisit this movie. I watched this movie many years later in theaters. Okay, there was kind of a reissue of the movie. There's a film print. Amazing experience. If you get the chance at any point to go see Batman, the 1989 film, shown on the big screen, preferably a film version, rather than a digital kind of thing, please do that, because it does give you this kind of like different feel watching this movie. It's like you're watching the movie for the first time, And I had the same thing, when I watched Batman Returns as well on the big screen, or Back to the Future, stuff like that. Definitely, if you can watch this movie on the big screen, do so, okay? Especially a film version of it. Maybe I just got lucky. Maybe they don't redo this anymore, but man, that blew me away again, watching this movie on the big screen. I love it. One of my favorites, ever, I would say. The first two Batman films, I have trouble figuring out which I like better than the other, but they are right up there as some of my favorite movies of all time. So, high praise, I know. But what can you do? I can't hate every movie all the time, all right? Here's a movie I like. Check it out. It's Batman. It's awesome. You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.